Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin, we would like to remind you that this session has been pre-qualified to support continuing educational requirements for several CompTIA, GIAC, and CertNexus cybersecurity certifications. FCA members may receive attendance documentation for today's panel by scanning their badge at the iPad near the exit. We are grateful to CompTIA, GIAC, and CertNexus, as well as FCA preferred partners, American Public University, Sounds Institute, and Western Governors University, for helping us bring necessary training sessions and certification opportunities to our members and attendees. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Tina Jordan, Vice President, Membership, FCA International.
Hello, and welcome to today's session. Women in FCA hold several of these panel sessions throughout the year, as well as the annual Women's Appreciation event held at West in San Diego in each February. Our upcoming fiscal year 2023 panels will be held in November at TechNet Indo-Pacific in Hawaii, in May at FCA's International's TechNet event, cyber event in Baltimore, and then again next August back here in TechNet Augusta. All of the women in FCA events, panels, and receptions are made possible by our sponsors. Our longtime sponsor, Sienna Corporation, is partnering with Converge One Government Solutions for this panel today at TechNet Augusta. We are so pleased that they are supporting women in FCA, and we're very grateful for your sponsorship. All of the senior cyber leader panels are followed by a Meet the Panelists reception. Today, we are happy to invite you to the reception, which will take place immediately following this panel at 5 p.m. in the Riverview hallway, which is not this hallway, it's the one right across, back by the Estes and Lamar rooms. You have a ticket for the event, which was attached to your registration badge, so please be sure to redeem it at the bar for a drink and join us. This panel has been approved for several continuing education credits, as Paul mentioned in the back. However, you do need to stay the full hour to receive the credit, and you need to make sure to have your badges scanned, and the scanning machines are back there. They don't turn on until 5 o'clock, and they turn off at 5:15. So, and you can't leave and come back. I'm not sure why, but that's just one of the rules they have. So make sure you get your badge scanned between 5 and 5:15 before you head over to the Riverview hallway. So with that, I would like to acknowledge our corporate sponsor representatives. Tom Finney is a Technical Account Director at Sienna Government Solutions Incorporated. Tom, would you please stand and be recognized? And now I would like to invite to the podium Rachel Kroll, Government Account Manager, Information Technology at Converge One Government Solutions. Rachel will introduce the panel. So please join me in a warm FCA welcome for Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. I am honored to be here today to represent Converge One Government Solutions. I'm especially pleased to introduce Ms. Nancy Patel, the moderator of this exceptional panel. Ms. Patel is Vice President of Public Sector at Immuta, a leader in cloud data access control with expertise in engineering, security, ethics, and law. She has more than 2 decades of experience in cybersecurity, data analytics, and the public sector. She deploys industry best practices to expand Immuta's capacity and ensure its public sector customers receive the best support, guidance, and delivery possible to meet their data governance needs. Ms. Patel is devoted to empowering women working in technology and national security. She launched the Women of Immuta Network and Coffee Roulette, a virtual coffee date that offers women the opportunity to network, share career development advice, and find common ground. Thank you, Ms. Patel, for loaning us your time and talent on the Senior Leaders panel here today. We are looking forward to a great discussion. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I'm super excited to be here and very excited and honored to be sitting next to these women on the panel today. Hopefully we have some exciting conversation in store related to risk management and how this group of women views it and sees it in their day-to-day jobs. So really excited to share that with you. We'll quickly do some introductions, and we'll start at the far end of the table with Ms. Bhavani Turasingham. Dr. Turasingham is the Founders Chair Professor of Computer Science, the founding Executive Director of the Cybersecurity Research and Education Institute, and the co-director of the Women in Cybersecurity and Women in Data Science Centers at the University of Texas at Dallas. She's also a visiting senior research fellow at King's College, the University of London. In addition to her accomplishments in academia, she has also spent time in industry at Honeywell, MITRE, and the National Science Foundation. She has authored 16 books, published over 130 journal articles, and over 300 conference papers, and has invented 7 patents in cybersecurity and data science. She received her PhD, that's right, wow. She received her PhD in computability theory from the University of Wales and the prestigious earned higher doctorate from the University of Bristol in the UK for her published work in secure data management. So please welcome Ms. Teresa.
Hard act to follow.
Next is Captain Christina Hicks. Captain Hicks is the commanding officer of Navy Cyber Defense Operations Command, the Navy's cybersecurity service provider, and she's commander of Navy's Defensive Cyber Operations Task Force 1020. A career information professional officer, she has served over 23 years and has experience across information technology, space communications, and surface warfare. Captain Hicks has served in the office of the Chief of Naval Operations and previously commanded Navy Computer and Telecommunications Station in Guam. She is a certified information systems security professional, a project management professional, designated joint qualified officer, a member of Navy Space Cadre, and holds degrees in professional physics, engineering management, and space systems operations. She's the founder of the Women in the Navy Hampton Roads chapter. Please welcome Captain Christina Hicks. Next, Ms. Wanda Jones-Heath is the Principal Cyber Advisor for the Department of the Air Force. In this role, Ms. Heath provides subject matter expertise to the Secretary of the Air Force and Air Force Chief of Staff, as well as the Undersecretary of Defense and the OSD PCA. She's responsible for overseeing the implementation of the Air Force's cyber strategy, managing cyberspace recruitment, resourcing and training cyber mission forces, assessing cyber readiness, orchestrating cyber acquisition, advocating for cyber investments, implementing cybersecurity supply chain risk management, and securing information systems and weapon systems. I'm very excited to get into some of that in a few minutes. Mrs. Jones-Heath spends much of her time connecting teams together, building bridges for collaborating, and finding and addressing gaps in the Air Force's cybersecurity posture. Prior to her current position, Ms. Jones-Heath previously served as the Chief Information Security Officer, and she graduated from the University of South Carolina in 1990 with a degree in computer science. Please welcome Ms. Jones-Heath. And lastly, next to me, but not least for sure, Ms. Victoria Washington is the founder, president, and CEO of Vision IT, a woman-owned small business in San Antonio, Texas. Since Vision IT's inception in 2003, Ms. Washington has led Vision IT to win and sustain several multi-year contracts across the Department of Defense and intelligence agencies across the United States and abroad. Ms. Washington is passionate about educational development of underserved populations, particularly in STEM, as well as entrepreneurship and encouraging women in the workforce. Harnessing this passion, she pioneered a women's professional networking platform called Women with Vision. Ms. Washington has degrees in computer science and math from Grambling State University and systems engineering from George Mason University. Please welcome Ms. Victoria Washington. So I think with those introductions, we can all say these are the folks that are very qualified to tell us about risk management, the risk management framework, and I think how we can improve as a team going forward on this. So start out with kind of a broad question for you all. Maybe start with Ms. Washington next to me. What does risk management mean to you, and how do you think about it day to day?
It's a journey. It's ever going. There's no final destination. As cyber threats continue to change day in and day out, compliance, we have to just continue to readjust as we assess, identify, and reevaluate how we're going to address those concerns. So it's a continuing journey that we're on and not looking forward to it stopping anytime soon.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, Captain Hicks, what are your thoughts on kind of how you think about risk management?
Well, as leaders, risk management, that's our everyday job. So it's something that we're constantly thinking about and balancing. It's how we have to identify risk, we evaluate it, and most importantly, as leaders, we prioritize it, right? We have to balance competing priorities, getting the mission executed, operations. So we have to think about our personnel who are always a priority, also safety, those sorts of things. So really it's what we get paid to do is risk management every day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great, a journey and every part of the everyday life. Wanda, I'm curious, do you have a story or kind of something you could share with us about how you've actively implemented risk management kind of in your day-to-day job? Or?
Yeah, I look at it as, certainly agree with both of the previous persons, but I look at it from a readiness standpoint. There are multiple lenses to risk. You know, whether it's a cyber risk to our asset, whether it's a risk to our people, you know, having the right skills. One of the things I focus on certainly is, you know, how do we ensure that risk does not, keep us from doing our mission. And so I spend a lot of time with the warfighter and understanding their lens of risk. You know, there's a no-go or go decision. You know, is it the assets availability? Do we have the right people, the right skills? And then, you know, depending on, you know, the pieces of the mission that require us to have those dependencies. So for me, risk is every day. Everything I do is a lens through risk, in whether it's an investment, whether it's taking an asset out of the inventory or having the right people in the right place.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's sort of a lens for viewing all the decisions, I think, yeah. Dr. Therese-Ingham, you have a unique, I think, view on this as well. What are your thoughts or how you look at it?
Yes, so I've been working in cybersecurity or computer security since 1985 when I was at Honeywell. And then I wasn't really, developing some high assurance secure database systems, and I wasn't really that involved in risk. But only after 9/11 and when the 9/11 Commission report came out about information sharing. And so I used to teach at FCA as well, PDC at the time. And so need to know versus need to share. And so there were some folks who said that if we share the wrong information, we will be fired. If we don't share, we are not going to be punished. But then, after 9/11 happened, the report said clearly information sharing was really crucial. That means we have to look at the risks involved. That's when I got into, cyber risks. So what are the risks with respect to sharing information? And then we started conducting research, quite a bit of research on risk and what about various other aspects with respect to risk versus security. And that also applies, as we have discussed the other panelists, like our day-to-day lives, right? So we always have to analyze what the risks involved and then take appropriate actions.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Let's dive maybe one step deeper, and Captain Hicks, I'm particularly curious of your thoughts on this, but also welcome others on the panel to chat about it too. It's been over 8 years since we first started the risk management framework. Everyone's favorite topic, maybe, I don't know, here in DoD. And with RMF, I'm curious, what do you see as some of the biggest benefits that it offers, and where are there still challenges or areas for opportunity that need to be addressed?
Thank you, Nancy. So think about Navy's risk management framework, RMF, and its predecessor, DIACAP. I think we've actually got probably more like almost 20 years of experience with this process. To be honest, I had to think a bit about what the benefits have been. I understand what the reason is. It's a process for how we evaluate our IT systems against the NIST cybersecurity framework. It has raised awareness, I think, not only from the importance of baking in cybersecurity into our IT systems, but also for the folks who are going to operate those systems. It raised awareness, okay, it's important to make sure you're stigged and you're patched and you're properly configured. So that is all goodness, but challenges, I didn't have to think very long about that one. First and foremost, it doesn't work. It does not make us more secure. As Mr. Weiss, the Don CIO, says, cybersecurity is not a compliance issue. RMF is compliance-based. It's a checklist. It's, hey, do you meet all these security controls? It's a very manually intensive process, lots of hours spent, resources, our people are resources, and we have to put a lot of folks towards this process. And at the end of the day, it doesn't make us more secure. I defend and protect all of our Navy networks, and I will tell you that the vast majority of incidents that my team responds to are on ATO networks. So what has it done for us? I like to think of an ATO as like when you go to a new car lot and you buy a beautiful, shiny new car. you're all excited and you drive it off the lot, what happens? It immediately drops in value. It's no longer worth what you paid for it. And then it continues to appreciate every day, and as the years go on, and an ATO is exactly the same. It may have meant something the day you got it. My network it's patched, it's staged, it's properly configured, I am safe. I tell you what, it becomes less and less valuable each day thereafter, and that's why it doesn't work. Because you can't predict every vulnerability that's going to exist. You can't predict every threat and how things are going to be exploited, and that's what that checklist is trying to do. So the other thing is, an ATO is really, it's a snapshot in time, right? What we need, what we have to get to going forward, and probably we'll be talking more about this, is how we continuously monitor our networks. Don CEO's got a cyber ready initiative, and it's how do we basically make those network owners work for it every day? How do they earn that ATO every single day? And that's where we need to get to in the future, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that later, so I'll end there.
That's great. Other thoughts on this one?
I certainly agree. It doesn't work. As the former CISO, and now as the principal cyber advisor, I am inheriting a lot of ATOs and looking at the damage assessments when we have breaches. You're right. The systems have a wonderful piece of paper that says, I have met the requirements. And so one of the things we try to do is using best practice from industry. Pen testing, hackers, things like that is what we've been focused on to try to really get to the bottom of, can we survive if we have to use that asset?
Yeah. That's great. A couple of things you said that I thought were interesting. Cybersecurity is not a compliance issue, that you said, that Don CIO said. I think that's a really good point. We kind of talked about bad and what's not working, and then you talked about kind of how can we leverage industry best practices. But if you were to think of a perfect world, or if we were having the same conversation 5 or 10 years from now, what do you think maybe it would look like better than a piece of paper or a checklist? Do you think it's that continuous idea, or implementing it every day? What works? Anybody?
Was that directed at?
Yeah, either of you, whoever wants to have a go.
I'm happy to have a go at that one. So it really comes down to, it's gonna be a multi-pronged approach. Ms. Jones-Heath alluded to like that auditing piece, that penetration testing, kind of going in and doing that testing and auditing process. Absolutely, that's a piece of the pie. What I'm very interested in is how we get to continuous monitoring, how we assure that I have visibility into every piece of my network and access. And so I can, the fact that the adversary is gonna find a vulnerable point and exploit it, that's a given, it's gonna happen. But how do I get that immediate alert and the ability to do incident response? How do I protect the network? And by the way, there's another piece on the front end when we talk about acquisition and how we're actually developing and building our networks. We have to bake in cybersecurity from the front end. There's been some great discussion today about zero trust and ICAM. So, okay, great, they get on, but they can't laterally move. They can't escalate privilege, all of these things. That's how we get to truly securing our networks. It's not, oh, we did our checklist, we're good today, see you in 3 years.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good kind of twist to Victoria here. I think to the point of baking it into acquisition, I love that. Start at the beginning, right? That's what we've learned, is you have to start with those ideas because it's almost impossible to catch up on the back end. I'm curious, Victoria, how do you see that from the perspective of industry or as a small business owner? What's your interaction with RMF, and have you seen, risk management and cyber start getting baked into acquisition? What's your view on that from the kind of the industry side?
So I look at it from, there we go. From two perspectives. One, as a government contractor, we're supporting the government, so we have members that are part of the RMF team. And with that, it's different across agencies, right? As a small business, we may have done it really well in Army, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the same way in the Navy. it's a cost that associates with that, having that type of talent on your team. From the second perspective, internally from an organization, we have to implement risk management. We have to be able to secure our network, implementing the CMMC, and once again, there's a cost associated with that. We don't have the resources necessarily to always have multiple senior engineers. We wear multiple hats. We don't have a dedicated, cybersecurity team or RMF team to help us through that. As we grow, and I just look forward to, working with our government agencies to let them see that it's not just an issue that they're facing. The government's asking for this level of security, but it comes at a cost as well. So how can we mitigate some of the cost? How can we provide this type of service that they're needing as well?
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks. We'll change direction just a little bit. And Dr. Tracingham, I'm very curious about some of the research that you've done related to risk and risk management, and thinking about the trade-off that we kind of often think about with respect to data security and then the actual utility and how much and where we can use the data. And then, Ms. Washington just brought up cost, but there's obviously a big cost to implementing those risk management rules and strategies. So how do you figure out the balance? What have you found?
Right, so that's really a very good question. So we've done a lot of work on risk with respect to security and privacy. And so one of the things that you can do, especially say with privacy, you can really do a lot of masking of the data to the point that it's not going to be of any value, right? Because if you sort of perturb the data or include random values and so on, the data could be soon useless. And so that's where risk comes in, right? So risk is a major part. If there are no risks, then why do we need to mask the data? And then, of course, cost, right? So when you bring in the cost, privacy protection as well as implementing all these access control and all the security measures, they come at a cost. And so these three, risk, cost, and then the utility of the data. So these are our three parameters. And then, of course, it becomes, in a way, a dynamic programming problem, right? So keeping the cost fixed, then what about risk versus the privacy/security? Or if you want privacy/security, then what are the risks and then what are the costs? So that sort of is one thrust of our research. And then the other thing also we do is, we talked about all the testing, penetration testing and so on. There's now increasing interest, especially with safety critical systems and cyber physical systems, the power grid and so on, to bring in formal methods. Now, we know that formal methods for verification is very expensive, but that gives us a lot more assurance. And so bringing in formal methods, of course, why do we want to verify every piece of code? Especially these systems, cyber physical systems, like we are now working on Internet of Transportation. These are massive systems. So why do you want to verify every piece of code when the risk is not as high, right? So there's a trade-off there. And then another thing that I'm on the advisory board of a company, and they implemented the NIST, the risk framework, and now they are doing quite well with respect to getting insurance. So they are measuring the risks, and then the companies are buying into them with respect to getting insurance. So that's also another area where companies, of course, if the companies have already been attacked, then of course the insurance is going to be higher, and then the other company's insurance is going to be lower. So it's sort of an interdisciplinary approach. It's not just computer scientists and cybersecurity specialists. We have to bring in the data scientists, and of course the decision science, and then the policy folks, and then the economists for the cost. So it's very much an interdisciplinary research, across multiple disciplines. So that's one of the challenges that we are being faced with these days. Yeah.
Other thoughts on that and kind of the balance of that triangle? Okay. Let's switch gears a little bit again, because we talked a little bit about supply chain and the global supply chain, and especially I think risk related to supply chain, but just in the cyber world as well specifically. It seems like every day it's becoming a little bit worse or more dangerous there. Ms. Jones-Heath, starting with you, and please the rest of the panel jump in. How do we think about risk management within the supply chain specifically? Have there been successes with respect to applying risk management to the supply chain without just stopping everything? How do you see that?
So the supply chain risk management definitely is a key part of the risk management framework. That was a new add along with privacy. So, are we there yet? We're trying to really figure out, how do we do that? COVID taught us a lot, right? When we couldn't get parts and things like that, especially for legacy systems. So we have to think about that. Also counterfeit. When you have counterfeit IT and routers and things like that, it is really a mission impact. And trying to figure out, how to address it, we have to address it up front. We have the policies in place, but the execution piece is things that we are really struggling with. With the new executive order, we just also received the White House memo that talked about investing in supply chain risk management and how do we, put things in place logistically so that we don't have to wait to get them. We know that our adversary is very vigilant in trying to add things to our network that we didn't ask for. And so how do we test that, right? One way we do it is, pen testing. We pull things off the line and we use the services of the OSI to kind of help us find counterfeit things like that. And we've been very successful in doing that, but we don't do it at scale. And so we're trying to figure out how do we do that in the acquisition community? How do we really engage them early, add it in the contracts for our industry partners? How do we engage everyone we need from a team perspective to start addressing it early and often?
Can I add something to that? It was a really excellent answer. So I'd like to talk a little bit about supply chain from a more of a software perspective, because we think about supply chain usually sort of as hardware, right? So software, again, it applies for hardware as well. Coming from different parts of the world, no longer is all of the software being implemented in the US. It's coming, a lot of the software coming from India and some other parts of the world. And so when you bring in all these pieces of software, and then when you are assembling them together, that there are risks involved. We don't know what the foreign countries, there could be adversaries, planting Trojans and malware and so on. And so what are the risks involved when you put it all together? So I have studied sort of supply chain more from the software perspective and working with risk and decision scientists. And so what are the risks involved? Maybe if it's coming from UK, is it sort of a little safer than say if it's coming from India, or if it's coming from China or Nigeria or whatever. So that's also another aspect that we've got to be thinking about. And there's also data with respect to data sharing. Data is coming from all over the place. You put it together and develop a data product. Then what are the risks involved, right, from the different parts? So it's somewhat similar to what you have said, but then there might be some different aspects when you talk about software.
Yeah, that's really interesting too, thinking about data lineage and how that is very much a parallel to supply chain and how we understand risk related to the data, but also to software and to hardware. It's kind of, there's an overlap or a parallel there. That's great, thank you. Captain Hicks, going back to kind of what you were saying earlier and what we were talking about, I'm curious, you talked a little bit about continuous monitoring, but are there other tools or technologies in risk management today that you think we could lean on a little bit more or could better inform how we're approaching risk management in DoD?
Absolutely, and I can speak to the way that we're approaching this in Navy. So during the global pandemic and the new kind of digital environment we found ourselves in, needing to do more telework and still execute mission, the Navy made a big leap into the cloud environment, specifically Microsoft Office 365, flank speed. What that enabled us to do from a cybersecurity perspective is to then leverage the security tools, the 365 Defender tools that came along with that licensing. And what we found was it just was transformative in how we executed defensive cyberspace operations for the Navy. So we essentially went from 170 plus sensors across all of our Navy networks to now when we turned on MDE on the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint on our endpoints, we're at over half a million sensors now and counting. The number just continues to grow as we continue to onboard it across our accepted networks. So now you take all of that data and we are leveraging Microsoft's just enormous lake of data from billions of endpoints all over the world, correlating that with real-time vulnerability and threat intelligence information. And it's just opened the aperture for us to get to that true continuous monitoring capability. One of the exciting things is we've really started to even develop more in that capability, what we call an asset awareness map. So, right, each of those hosts, each of the endpoints have to ping back to the cloud, and so now you get an IP for every one of those. Now all of a sudden you know where that endpoint is specifically, geographically to whatever command. Which that used to take us, that used to take us days sometimes to correlate an IP address. Or, for example, just to, you get an alert and we'd have to reach out to whatever command once we correlated that IP address, which took days, we're already days behind. Then once we figure that out, then you reach out to the local defender. Oh, by the way, it might be the weekend, it might be, the lights may be off, we gotta wait till Monday to get in touch with them. Whatever it may be, but this whole process could take up to weeks just to respond to an alert. Now with this endpoint detection capability at EDR, we can reach out within seconds, isolate the host if need be, pull any data that we need. It doesn't matter what the local defender is doing, if they're at work or not. So for us, it's just been transformational. And it directly correlates to how we get to a continuous ATO. Because now I can look across all of my networks and say, okay, what is your status? Are you STIG? Are you patched? We can pull, are you vulnerable and where? And we have all these wonderful visualizations using the toolkits. So it's been transformational for us. Our NAO, our authorizing official, they're excited. We're trying to figure out how we translate that into an actual continuous ATO program. But we're very excited, and it's just about leveraging what's already out there in industry, using the technology to get there, get away from the checklist mentality, and actually use what's out there. And it's not just about the endpoint. Again, we need vendors, we need tools for that auditing piece, that penetration testing piece. It's all of those puzzle pieces will fit together to get where we are just using technology to get to true cybersecurity as opposed to what we're doing right now.
Yeah, that's very exciting, and I'm thinking about all that data that you have now, and it's a beautiful data analysis, data science problem. Now we have the data, what can we do with it? Let's ask it hard questions. That's really exciting, thank you. Ms. Jones-Heath, I'm curious because we talked about tools and tech and kind of how you're leveraging that. But from your perspective, I think maybe you have a slightly different approach to investment and resources. What do you think is important, and how do we invest in the right places to move forward?
Just to build on a little bit what she talked about, we have the same issues, with same space, but we're also taking a different aspect on that as well, building more sensors, on our weapon systems, our operational technology, building that map, so to speak, so that we can see all of our assets, and then, really focusing on our service retained capabilities, our mission defense teams, and putting those assets on the critical systems that we know we're going to need if we have to go to war in the Indo-PACOM region. So we've been really focused on that. And when I jumped in the seat as a PCA, the first question on day 3 of Honorable Kendall was, who can tell me my cybersecurity and cyber defense posture? Nobody moved. And I said, sir, that would be me. As your principal cyber advisor, I focus day to day on, understanding all of the assets, where they are, what their condition is, whether it's a weapon systems. We did great on our networks, our operational technology, and then our people. And so what I've been doing is I stood up a task force Sentinel Stand, which from January to March, We had a 4-month sprint to where we can start looking at our assets that we need in INDOPACOM. You know, I sent the team of 4 out to those specific bases that the commander wanted us to take a look at. Found a lot of challenges and presented it back to the boss. A lot of analysis, a lot of going through a lot of, you know, working with NSA, working with NASIC, getting that threat picture, really understanding what the adversary can do to us, and then regurgitating it back to the leadership. And what we found was that we have some huge gaps. You know, how do we fix that? Whether it's tech debt, you know, we got money for that. Whether it's, you know, adding some different types of sensors to our weapon system, building our C2 structure. You know, General Brunson talked about that in INDOPACOM, and ensuring that we have that resiliency built in. And so we were very successful to get some money to kind of start down that road, but certainly not enough because we have not invested. And so he realizes that we have to do more for cyber, more for enterprise IT, and more for cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's great. I can't imagine that day and raising your hand and being like, oh. That's amazing. Ms. Washington, I'm curious, kind of pulling this thread a little bit further from the industry side, how do we invest as industry to help and move forward with the problem too? And where do you see industry specifically being able to fill some of those gaps and helping DoD?
I think Ms. Jones-Heath hit it on the point when she said we have to have the discussion. Industry and government have to talk about what's real, what's realistic given budget constraints, because sometimes we want the Louis Vuitton, but we only can afford the Target purse, right? It's a real issue. And so that's the key. I mean, we have to have these discussions. We have to be realistic on what we can do and what we can't do, not overpromise. Because when we overpromise and don't deliver, that's a problem. So the key is we have to have the discussion, we have to know what's real, and we have to know what we can do within the budget that we have.
Yeah, that's a great point. Setting those guardrails, either way.
I mean, and you have to set the appetite for risk.
Right, right. Yeah.
That's the big thing. What's your appetite for the risk that you're going to take?
Yeah. Yeah, I like thinking, it's, you know, data is the crown jewel. You can't have millions of crown jewels. So how do you decide what's the number one priority, what's the number one resource, and then how do we kind of go with that and
Yes.
address problem number one, priority number one. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Dr. Terasingham, I want to go back to the data and all this great cyber data that we're getting, and then applying data science and AI and ML to some of that, and, you know, how does that evolution of explosion of data science fit into this risk management story?
Right, so I think that's my biggest worry. One thing, of course, we are applying data science, machine learning, AI for lots of problems, including cybersecurity, and it's showing a lot of promise. And we've written a number of books and papers and implemented solutions and open source software and so on, so that's great. However, we are using AI for almost everything, right? Healthcare, finance, manufacturing, Internet of transportation, almost every aspect of our lives, they are now pushing AI, and it's become very real. What happens if these AI machine learning techniques are attacked? That's a very real possibility. And so if AI ML is being applied everywhere, and then these machine learning techniques are being attacked, then imagine the sort of the consequences. Can we trust these AI ML techniques? So a large part of my research, at least about 50% of my work, is on what's called trustworthy machine learning. But the challenges are so huge. So there's one group in the UK that's from University of Oxford that's looking at, again, formal verification for machine learning. And in the US, it's sort of picking up more recently. Then there's another group of researchers and even practitioners looking at adversarial machine learning. So these machine learning techniques are attacked. So the adversary is looking at our models, our data that we are using to train the machine learning techniques and trying to thwart everything. And so we are trying to look at what the adversary is up to and then trying to thwart the adversary. So it's becoming sort of game playing between us and the adversary. And so we are modifying the machine learning algorithms like neural networks and support vector machines, modifying it so that the adversary is not going to figure out what we are doing. But then if we are modifying the data, modifying the machine learning, it goes back to how much can we modify, my earlier point. We can modify to modify and perturb the data where it's not going to be of any value. So the challenge is to find the right type of modification, the right metric to use, and at the same time be useful. So we go back to the original, the risks involved. So if there are no risks, then we don't need to do anything. So we've got to figure out how much risk, what is the risk, rather than simply perturbing the data and modifying the machine learning algorithms. But still, this machine learning being attacked algorithms when everybody's using, right? Everybody's saying we need more and more AI people to work on practical problems. And so if these machine learning algorithms are attacked, and we heard that COVID vaccines that were being developed, some other company was attacking the algorithms and trying to figure out what the US was doing from some other country. And so there's a very real danger. So that's one of my concerns. And although you didn't ask this question, another one I want to add is if quantum computing becomes real, I hope it's not going to happen in my lifetime, because I'm really, really worried about the crypto systems, unless post-quantum cryptography really works. So that's a terrifying situation, because all our crypto will be of no use. So I just wanted to add that bit in.
I definitely want to jump in that crypto mod. It will happen in your lifetime, according to the threats. But we are focusing on that too, because we know that that's going to be a huge impact to the way we do business. But back to the AI, the pieces that that I worry about from a risk perspective is the ethics piece. We design it. Human. Design it. And so are we really building the neural networks right, using what, the human, you can build whatever you want to build. Now, how do we validate that we're not imposing something into those algorithms that we really don't want?
Ms. Jones, you've raised that's another aspect, since it's not cybersecurity, somewhat related. That's the whole area of ethics in AI, fairness in AI, right? So that's another worry. So you add a fairness metric, and these AI algorithms, are more fair. But then when we add fairness metric, then what about the privacy? What about all security? You bring in all that together. I don't know. It's we need to start training people when they are very young. I mean, you can't get someone, say, after working for 40 years to come and like myself, looking into these deep problems. Someone, young in school, high school, junior high, train them so they start thinking of these problems when they are younger. So that's maybe one solution. Yeah.
Well, great.
And discrimination, of course, AI
biases.
algorithms. Yeah.
Nothing to worry about. Everything's great. Are there other, this is a very interesting kind of topic, I think. Are there other things that you worry about or that keep you up at night in this space, in this kind of risk management space that we haven't already discussed, or AI, ML? Anyone else? I'm curious too, along those lines, just for anyone, about how, you mentioned adversarial ML, but how do we make sure that what we understand about the adversary and their approach, how do we efficiently feed that back into what we're building into risk management and things like that? Any thoughts on that and how to do it?
It's really understanding the threat picture, and it changes all the time, right? And we have multiple adversaries, so you can't just focus on one. Everybody's focusing on China, but there are also other adversaries, whether they're individual or state-sponsored, that we have to understand what they're doing as well. And so we spend a lot of time, with NSA and NASIC and other intel agencies to get that information. One area we're certainly getting more focus on is space. Understanding, how space assets are being used, by our adversary. We've never talked about that a lot. And with the new Space Force, I represent both the Air Force and Space Force. And so we're getting more into that because those assets are truly legacy. And cybersecurity was never part of the equation. And so we have to understand how that's being used, the data links. Another area that kind of gives me pause is, if we have to go to war and we have to, meet them where they are, can we sustain? We can't do it long distance, so we have to be in the region in order to combat that. And it's going to be, both from, a network standpoint and on the ground. So we have to be prepared. Centers of gravity, we understand where they are in that region, and we're working, with the Navy as well to make sure that we build up enough resiliency over in the region.
I'd like to further comment on something Ms. Jones-Heath brought up with regards to that intel piece being so important to operations. So it usually comes as a surprise to a lot of folks. I have quite a large and robust intelligence shop within Navy Cyber Defense Operations Command, close to 100 folks. We were the first in the DoD in terms of defensive operators who got a reporting certification. We're now helping other services to get theirs. But we put out reporting at the secret level to our local defenders in order to help them in the fight. And we have that very close integration and synergy between intelligence and operators, because when we go out and hunt, we want to do it based on risk. We want to do it based on that threat intel. Where do we think the adversary is going to go? And then we're being proactive. So it's an important piece. The other one I would say is in terms of trying to get ahead of the adversary is unleashing the incredible imagination and innovation of our young people. Like for NCDOC, we have the Navy Red Team also integrated with our operators. It's what we refer to as purple teaming. So we have our Navy Red Team. They're going in, they're saying, okay, if I was the bad guy, this is how I think I would attack this network. And then they go execute the mission, they see if they're successful. And then importantly is that feedback loop to our hunters of, hey, you need to potentially look at this TTP, and then also feedback to our folks to get new signatures out there. And so it should just be a continuous loop.
Yeah. I'd just like to add something. What Captain Hicks has said, and also Ms. Jones and Ms. Washington. I mean, everything in the end, right, revolves around risk. So whether it's adversarial attacks or poisoning the data or any other types of attacks, we have to look at risk. So the point that I'm trying to, and I was not, because my PhD was not in cybersecurity, so I got into cybersecurity 5 years later when I joined Honeywell. And so I was not really made to think about risks. So when we are teaching our students, and also the younger they are, some I finished teaching pro bono 26 high school intern students. And so I was drilling it into them about risks involved so that they can start thinking about risk, right from an early age or when they start their careers. And so develop solutions in accordance with the risk, not just sort of simply going and looking at, it's a neat problem to solve or lots of research to be done, but you've got to think about the risks involved and develop appropriate solutions. Yeah, I think Ms. Washington was going to say something.
So for small businesses, we can't underestimate that we're not being attacked. We sometimes have to say, okay, is it worth me implementing, cybersecurity? It's a cost associated with that. Or do I write on this proposal? I can't do both. But I cannot afford not to do both, right? So don't underestimate, just because we're a small business, that we're not targets. We're the easiest targets. And so cybersecurity is important to us regardless of our business size, which is a lot of small businesses take it for granted, or they just opt out not doing it.
Right, that's trouble.
It is.
Yeah, that's great. We have a few more minutes, so I wanted to see if there was questions from the audience, or let someone else have a go.
Yes, so we have a couple questions from the audience. Where do you turn to outside of your organization to refresh or build your cyber-related skills?
Personally, it's a continuous learning model. For example, I'm working on my doctorate. I'm doing technical stuff, and you need to stay proficient because technology changes. And I encourage all of my team and the folks who I mentor to always think about what's happening in the environment and go get that skill. We can never have enough people who understand cybersecurity, who understands, red teaming and penetration testing, all of those tools that we have in our inventory that we don't use, on a daily basis. So continuous learning should be part of everyone's overall approach in this business.
I think I'd like to add, so even though I'm teaching, students almost around the world, I also learn, right? So ever so often, right, I did my CISSP 12 years ago and I passed, fortunately, first time, but I didn't keep up with the certificate. I should have applied for the recertification. And then I got my GCFA, so that I kept, the recertifications. And then I also last year, home at the pandemic, so I was wanting to learn more about cybersecurity policy. And so London School of Economics had an online course on public policy analysis, so I took that course. But my husband gets kind of embarrassed because he says, what if the professor goes and takes his exam like GCFA? There were my students outside supervising, and what if I come out because they tell us the results? Fortunately, I passed. He said it will be a total embarrassment. The professor has failed the GCFA. So he said, do not go and take any of these tests again. But I don't listen to him. I still do.
So in the military, we often have the problem of, we have these schoolhouses and they'll build a curriculum, and then what happens, right? That training becomes very quickly stale and not up to date. So we do leverage a lot of industry training to try and stay current on the newest tools and capabilities. Also, of course, they have the cybersecurity workforce requirements that we have all of our personnel meet. So they have to get those continuous education units every year, and that also helps us to stay current.
Education and training, right? And being part of the cyber workforce locally. And
That's great.
Another area we like to do is we like to send our folks to industry and vice versa to get that, maximize that experience and perhaps learn something that we're not doing really good. And so that helps when we can bring that back in to the department to take advantage of those new skills.
Absolutely. We actually will take field trips to industry SOCs, so if anyone wants to volunteer.
Other questions?
Yes, thank you. We have a couple more questions. How do we empower and encourage future cyber warriors to continue overcoming the risk management challenge?
We promise them we'll change it someday soon.
Persistence.
Your persistence, be consistent, bring your ideas forward, find a leader who's not afraid to take risk. I'm the one that's on the edge hanging with my nails saying, I got this. I'm not the typical cybersecurity person. I will push it right to the limit because I know that that's what the adversary does. So just find someone who will listen and will be your advocate to senior leaders.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more.
Okay, we have another question. Do you or all the panelists budget for penetration testing, incident response training, tabletop exercises, etc.? Also, how much time is spent per fiscal year for these trainings?
Not enough. One of the problems I have is they typically will white card cyber because they know what we can do. And so I'm working with our operational side where we have a test range, cyber test range, and I want to build it out a little bit. We have a small city that we use, and I want to build that out because, one thing that's absent is, our operational technology and being able to, train live on that, making sure that, we can participate fully and demonstrate to the warfighter that the adversary can do certain things to us, and they need to know how to react to it, because at the end of the day, when we execute our mission, if they can't think about how to do things differently because they don't have that asset, then we will not win, and we cannot lose.
What about on the Navy side? I'm just curious, like how much time is spent training versus kind of on the front lines, and how do you figure out the balance?
We obviously, given the mission that we're in, I'd say we're in constant daily contact with the adversary. So we are very active operationally, but we do spend a lot of time supporting Navy and joint exercises alike. I thought Mrs. Jones-Heath's comments were spot on. We always could be doing more, and we do white card too much. And that's something that we try to get that feedback loop of how we can get better injects so that we're getting higher quality training for our operators or for our warfighters.
Real ejects, not the fake ones.
Yes.
We like to, this is a hot button for me. We like to, kind of reserve and dumb it down, but we have some smart people that if we were to unleash them inside of an exercise, folks will be amazed.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah, it's impressive. Okay, well, I want to thank the panelists for all of your comments, and it's been really fun chatting with you and learning more about your perspective, and we'll welcome Tina back to the stage to wrap us up.
So I just want to mention the question about the training. So I'd be remiss if I didn't let you know about FCA's training. In an effort to help our members with their training and professional development, we actually have a few different offerings. We have partnered with American Public University Systems, the Sands Institute, and Western Governors University to allow our members to get bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, certificates, or just continuing education at special pricing or at discounts. We also have online on-demand classes that we offer. If you go to fca.org and go to the education dropdown, you can click the link to get to our on-demand online, and again, continuing education, professional development courses, and all sorts of things, program management, women in business, project management, intelligence courses, again, all at a discount for FCA members. Shameless plug, but I wanted to answer that question. Somebody asked about it. So, okay, with that, thank you so much, Nancy, and to our panelists. Let's give them another round of applause. As a token of our appreciation, FCA will be making a donation to on behalf of each of our panelists to the organization Girls Who Code. It's a nonprofit organization that aims to support and increase the number of women in computer science. Very fun. As mentioned before, this panel does qualify for continuing education credits. You'll see the scanners in the back. Make sure you get your badge scanned before you leave the room. And with that, we want to thank again to Sienna and to Converge One for sponsoring this panel. We couldn't do these panels without your support, and without your support, we couldn't have the reception, which we will now dismiss to go to. It's not in this hallway. It's in the next hallway. Follow signs to Lamar and Estes. You'll see it in the back. This reception is sponsored by Sienna and Converge One in association with Women in FCA. You don't have to be a woman to come to the reception. So please join us. Come meet the panelists. Spend some time networking. Have a great FCA evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow morning. Thank you again.
Nice job, baby.